friends, and welcome back. Well, this is going to be a pretty fun and unique build, so buckle in because we've got a lot to do here. So the basic premise of this project is it's a what if, so what might have been, Soviet era, anything from 1917 up through the fall of the Soviet Union, any era. So what I've decided to do is place my vehicle someplace maybe in the 60s, 70s time frame there. So I was looking for something of that era to kind of base it around. And so that's where the BTR60 comes into place. I also had in mind, and this was actually my first thought, I had some unique tracks, some traction devices I wanted to try to put onto it. Of course, the BTR60 has wheels, but I particularly like the BTR60 because of the way the fender arrangements are laid out here. So there's plenty of room, because what I wanted to do is make a Arctic or Alpine type specific vehicle here. So replace the wheels with the snowcat type tread patterns. And at this point, that's the only idea I had in my mind. So now it's time to start doing some kit bashing. I happen to have this BMP sitting around, and I thought, let's take that turret off of that kit, and let's see if we can maybe do some modifications here. And as you can see, there's this is where they just working it out on the fly is exactly what it looks like and exactly what I'm doing here. Obviously, the turret is of the wrong dimensions. It is way too wide for the body style of the BTR here. So we'll have to figure that out as we go along here. But again, quite a bit of test fitting here because I'm just trying to basically put this concept together. And even at this stage, I'm not sure if I'm going to be using this turret, but I'm kind of stubborn in this manner. So let's clip a few more parts and build this up a little bit further and see where we get along here. Well, now that I have a little more stability, we can kind of play with this a little bit more. Obviously, this turret is just way too wide for the structure of the BTR, but let's see how this is going to work out. I think I like this. Let's add those snowcat treads on here, give it a quick look. I do like the way this looks. I don't know, kind of a beefed up snowcat. You know, like I said, it's going to be in the Arctic, Alpine environments specific. It's a high-speed type of a tactical vehicle. And so pressing forward, let's just pretend like this is all going to work out and start cutting and pasting and see where this all leads to us. So with the BTR itself, I'm going to have to obviously plug some holes, change some shapes and things like that. And I'll start doing that with some plastic cardstock. This is 20 thousandths. And then the next thing I need to do is basically remove all of the surface details, all the hinges, all the splash rings, everything like that, off of the top of the BTR here, because there's just too many little nibs and knobs and bumps and whatever there, and I need to get those all flushed off so I can start to build it back up. And so now let's move ahead a little bit here, and we're going to need to plug up a lot of these hatches, and it's like the turret ring and things like that. So for that, once again, I'm using 20 thousandths plastic card here, and I'm just using the hatches themselves or the openings themselves just to give my template to cut the cardstock out. And on the interior, I'm just going to backfill that with some styrene rod just to give some support and some gluing stability and such to this. So once we have those strips in place, then I can go ahead and add the card to it. We'll get those settled in. We'll glue that together. It's going to be a little bit of filling and sanding involved here. Yes, you can't get away from that. Plus, I also need to smooth out some of those chisel marks and where we took off all those surface details. So a bit of work on the top of the structure here. Now, this gets where it gets kind of fun and creative, I guess. Let's figure out how we're going to make that turret kind of fit and look proper onto this. So the easiest idea I could come up with is that, the Soviets, they had their base BTR, they had the BMP, they wanted to match them up, and so they did it in just true Russian fashion. They just kind of went for it, and so they built out the superstructure a little bit. Nothing fancy here at all, just added some extra width to it, maybe punched it out on the interior side to give a little more extra room for, say, some ammunition racks or something like that. Again, made from cardstock. I'm using very thin 10 thousandths rod, just using the glue method, making some weld marks or weld beads along some of those edges here. And now this is a little closer. Now we have some width that the turret actually sits on, and you can see I've really moved the turret further back onto the BTR from where it started from the original. Okay, now on to the next problem to solve here. So how to reconfigure the suspension from the road wheels to these snowcat tracks. I should mention that these tracks, the snowcat here, this is taken from a snowcat file, so these are 3D printed out, and all the suspension underneath the axle and things like that, that's all gauged for the size of the snowcat. my vehicle, of course, is quite a bit wider than the average snowcat. So at this point, I'm trying to figure out how to securely put this all together here. And my first thought was, well, we'll use some brass tubing because I needed some, I thought, extra support here because of the weight of everything. Basically, that started to get to be quite a bit of a headache. So I started to look around at other solutions here, and I noticed, like, well, okay, I could probably start kit bashing some of the parts from the BTR, scratch build a few things, and put them all together. Maybe, in this case, I'm using the styrene tubes for the axles, and I could start kind of basically making it up as I go along here. But in the end, it actually works out. So it's one of those things. And here we are in true Russian fashion, brute force, a hammer that's way too big for the project, but I wanted some small discs, so I'm making some small discs from the punch and die just to cover up some of these different openings left over from the previous suspension system. Now that I have basically the components, the basic outline, the shell, if you will, of this what-if project in place, now I can go back to the instructions and start adding all the details and the various, grab handles and things like that to build up the kits as they would be if you were building the model itself. I'll be keeping in mind, of course, that I'll start using opportunities to add extra features here and there. One of the next opportunities to change up the configuration here is with this turret. I wanted to upgun the main armament, so change the BMP main gun to something larger, something a little bit more, menacing. So I just played around with a little bit of plastic tube and copper tube to see if I wanted to scratch build a new gun barrel. But then I remembered, hey, I've got this Canadian Sherman sitting over here in a parts box. I'm just going to grab the 6-pounder gun out of there. Needed to cut away a bit of the kind of the housing here, which meant that I have to resculpt some of the, I don't even know what you call this, the canvas stuff around the gun here. So resculpt some of that with epoxy sculpt. A nice quick job, and then we could just move along. And then next up, just adding some extra texture here using Mr. Surfacer 500, stippling that over the turret here just to give it a little bit more personality. By this point, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Starting to come together, just a few last details adding on here and there, basically following the instructions themselves. And now I can have a really good look at what this model looks like here. And I guess it's what if. It's definitely a hybrid of some sorts. I'm now getting down to the final small details of this project. Just kind of add bits and bobs here. You'll notice I've added brass grab handles. I've added some little photo etch features here and there. And I thought, I'm going to put some side skirts on here. And I really like the look of the rubber side skirts. I have no idea if they're appropriate for this era of vehicle, but what the heck, it's a what if. So I'm just going to add some fender side skirt sort of things here made from styrene. And now we're pretty much ready to go and ready for paint. A special thank you to all my amazing Patreon members for your incredible support. Your contributions help me continue to create content for this channel. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join our Patreon community. As a member, you'll gain access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early releases, and more. I hope you'll consider joining Patreon and supporting this channel. Thank you very much. Okay, now on to the paint. Now, if you want to skip ahead about 2 minutes, then you won't miss anything in terms of the final product. But this next little section here is my attempt to do something a little different on painting that I decided to change in the end. Yeah, I know, surprise, right? Coming from me. So when looking for some inspiration and references, I came across a lot of the snow camo uniforms that the Finnish Army, the Russian Army, the US Army uses in their cold weather snow uniforms. And they're all digital now, and they're very effective against the trees and the backdrops. I thought, okay, let's do something like that on this one. Kind of, modern scheme onto this kind of 70s, 80s era, or 60s, 70s era type vehicle here. And, in terms of the camouflage itself, it's not bad. I kind of like this. I go down this path for quite a while here, as we'll see. But eventually, in the end, it just didn't make sense to me. I was losing, I guess, the character of what that era, a what if vehicle even in that matter, would be in that era. But as you can see here, I'm starting off with the oil paints. I'm doing everything that I would normally do. And, you know, in the end, it just came to a point where I just said, this is not working for me. And I made the decision, let's just take a step backwards. Nothing wrong, no harm done, nothing at all. Let's go ahead and repaint this and move it into something that's, yes, a snow camouflage, but maybe something that's a little bit more appropriate and traditional for the era of the where this vehicle would have been a what if in. So here we come. Green paints, redoing the base colors, basically starting from scratch here and repainting the entire vehicle. Because I do this quite often where I go down a certain path and change my mind halfway through or even closer to the end and restart. I get a lot of comments sometimes where like, why do I do that? Or does it frustrate you or something like that? And the answer is, why do I do it? Because I just want to be happy with the final result. Does it frustrate me? Yeah. In this case, it actually did. I was spending a Saturday afternoon doing that camouflage, and by Sunday morning, I was like, this isn't working for me. But not so much that I get frustrated because I make mistakes or go down the wrong path. It's just, you know, time spent that you could have been moving along. But once I got started on this new camouflage pattern here, it just made sense to me, and it was like, okay, this is what should be from the entire time here. I'm purposely going kind of laterally with my camouflage pattern, the white marks and such like that, rather than horizontally, just to kind of change it up a little bit. And it just all seemed to work. It's more traditional. It gives the appearance of some weight and heaviness to this vehicle, and it just seems to fit the entire concept here. And now that I finally have my camouflage colors in place, and yes, I'm very much more happy with this, let's go ahead and start weathering. Primarily, I'll be using oil paints, and I think I'm going to do a bit of a lighter hand, a lighter touch with the weathering on this one. I think the environment, especially with the white in terms of camouflage, kind of allows that to happen. You can be more subtle with this, so we'll do that. We'll add some mud, some grit, some grimes. We'll profile some corners and edges and surface details. You know, the whole process here, but at least for me, a bit of a lighter touch. finally, this brings us to, I think, the last really major component we need to worry about or deal with in terms of painting. These are the 3D printed snowcat tracks. I've given them a primer coat of gray, which you can't tell because it's gray on gray print. And then I've just painted them out using Gen 3 acrylics. And then we'll weather them up again using the oil paints to tie them in with the remainder of the vehicle here. And now we can move on to the next part, which are the figures. Now these are 3D figures, found the files online, printed them out, and I'm talking figures in plural here because I started out working with 2 different figures. I painted them both up all the way to completion. In the end, you'll see only 1 figure on display just because it seemed to fit the scene just a little bit better. However, the process was the same for both figures. I'll try to concentrate the photographs or the images here, the video, on the figure that was actually used at the end. First step, I want to start working on the face because I'm still struggling here. So I figure if I can get the face to look somewhat decent, then I can work with the rest of the model, the rest of the figure. And now I have some base colors down, and these inks are something kind of new for me, but I'm really enjoying them. And in this case, they add a real richness to this leather parka that this guy's wearing. So just adding some inks, it's kind of a off red color, red-brown color, really saturated and enriched that color scheme. And then I can come back over the top, add some acrylics, add some highlights here and there, shadows, deepen those shadows if I want to. Just do the refinements as I would normally. And I can go back and forth with the oils and the inks. They're both acrylic products. I really enjoy this process right now. Just need to practice it a little bit more. Returning to the vehicle, let's start preparing for our base. So the base is going to be a snow scene, of course, and I'm going to add some snow effects onto the vehicle. So first base layer here is Terrain's snow effects. So this is an acrylic gel. It's white in appearance, and it has some body to it, so you can build up some bulk, some height, if you will. You can thin it out with a little bit of water if you want to. And then over the top of that, I'm going to be using these micro balloons. Now this adds kind of that lighter snow effect that's so important to really get a convincing appearance. Of course, this will just blow away if you don't set this in place. So I'm going to be using sand and gravel fixer. So similar to how you might work with pigments, I apply the micro balloons, and then I take the fixer and just to the side and let the capillary action kind of move it around and hold everything in place. And after just a little bit of time, I think we're at a place where, at least for the time being, until we get the base built, I think I'm at a good spot. It looks like it's been dashing through the snow, if you will. So now it's time to start concentrating on making a base. The base starts out in the usual way, just cut some insulation foam, making a little bit of scallops here on the edge to add some elevation, just a little bit of interest. This is going to be a really basic scene here. Now I'm going to turn back into using my plaster mix here as kind of my ground cover because, well, using Sculpey or anything else at this point would be kind of stepping backwards because they have color and the plaster is basically white, and this is going to be a snow scene. As you see, I've added the sides here so I can build this up a little bit. And we'll just kind of put that over the top here, get everything smoothed out. Now I have a nice foundation with which to add the rest of the ground cover. And then from my blue bowl of good stuff, from time to time, I'll just lay out a sheet of plaster, just make some plaster, lay it on a sheet, let it dry. And then I have these large pieces that I can break up, and these become rock outcroppings or different features that I can add to my dioramas. And then as for the base itself, well, I'm just going to be using, for the snow effects, the AK Snow. And once again, this is a paste, so you can spread it around. It's got a pretty good working time here. I'm using a fairly large brush, and I'll do this in a couple of different applications in order to get a nice smooth surface overall. And once again, you can dip it in some water, and that just helps kind of smooth things out just a little bit more if you want that type of effect, which I'm kind of going for that here. You can see that little rock outcropping to the front, and I've added a tree in the back. I'll add just a little bit of interest to the scene. If you want to see about making that tree, go back to my Yag Panther episode, and that shows how to make a tree similar to this. Now it's time to place it onto the base, and this is looking okay. Actually, it looks pretty okay. So the effects the winter effects I did on the vehicle seem to match fairly well onto the base itself. I'll make a few adjustments here and there, but it's getting there pretty close, and we're getting ready to get done. Here's my figure guy. Let's pop him in there. He's got some pins on the bottom of his foot. Jam him in there. He's going to be kind of looking down over the valley, perhaps, kind of surveying the scene. And there we go. We have our what if vehicle here, Soviet era, set in the 1960s, 70s-ish. BTR base, BTR-60 base. Got our BMP-2 turret with a British 6-pounder on top, and of course those snowcat tracks propelling it through this ice and snow of the Alpine or Arctic as a tactical vehicle, a quick response vehicle, proud member of the Soviet arsenal. So I hope you've enjoyed this project. It's been a lot of fun. It's fun to be creative in something like this. If you like this channel, please hit that like and subscribe. I do have a Patreon page. If you like to see more of this kind of work, the behind the scenes sort of thing, other projects that don't get seen at all, I'd check out that Patreon page. I'd love to have you over there as part of our community. In the meantime, everybody, take care, and of course, happy modeling.